faithfulness, truth, love, those things draw us. They draw the desire of our heart. When we have fallen in love for the first time in life, there's something that happens. We're like, wow, okay, this is what I've been looking for. That's sort of the experience of falling in love. Wow, this is the person in my life. It answers all of my questions. I always say too that when you experience something that's really wonderful, you're naturally want more of it. So I was invited to a Christian some many years ago, and they had me for dinner, and at the end they brought out this bowl of chocolate ice cream. I thought it was chocolate Trinity. Love chocolate ice cream. It's the Publix brand. It's the best ice cream I ever had. The store, hey, so I'm tasting this chocolate ice cream, but I've never had chocolate ice cream this good before, And I said, what is this? And they said, oh, it's chocolate Trinity. It's just Publix's ice cream. So that's like my favorite chocolate ice cream treat now. So there's Trinity, chocolate Trinity, it's got 3 kinds of chocolate in it. So, but here's the thing. That no matter how wonderful or good or beautiful or true or loving something is, one of the difficulties of being human is that it doesn't really ultimately ever fully satisfy us. And that's because even the best experiences that we ever have in life don't last forever. So I might see the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my life. Wow, this is really beautiful. I can't imagine a beautiful sunset. But at some moment, that sunset is finished. And even when we fall in love with another person, and it's deeply beautiful and wonderful, there is a boundary, and we all know it intuitively eventually. This person and I will not be together. And the mystery of death confronts us. That there is nothing in this world that lasts forever. No matter how good, beautiful, or loving or true, and we're hemmed in by this reality that we're finite beings, that we have in our hearts a longing that is greater than any particular moment that we ever experience in this life. So one of the great human beings in our Catholic Christian tradition that really looked at his own heart, looked at his own life, and reflected on this mystery, and expressed it probably better than anyone else, especially in the first 1,000 years of Christianity after the New Testament, was a saint by the name of Saint Augustine. And Augustine was raised by a very devout Christian mother, Monica, loved him a great deal, a pagan father, Patricius. And when Augustine got old enough to go to university studies, he said, I'm going to enjoy life now, And he was an eager searcher, so he was searching the philosophies of his day for truth. He also fell in love with a woman. They had a child outside of marriage, whom he named Deodatus, gift of God. So he was kind of bold, but he thought, in this new university world, I'm learning all this philosophy. He fell into what we call the philosophy of Manichaeism for a while, which believed that there was a good God and an evil God in battle. He's trying to figure himself out as he's going through life. But he wrote a little volume, which you can still find it, good English translation called The Confessions. And it's his inner story of his life. And on his feast day, which happened last August, it was every year in August, the second reading of the liturgy hours, main office of readings, which is the official prayer of the church, has a little tiny section from Augustine's writing his Confessions. And so I want to come back to that. But Augustine came to this fundamental awareness, and the awareness was this, that our hearts are restless. Nothing in this world can satisfy that longing except God. Our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So by this propelled Augustine, this restlessness in his heart, to go on a journey, on a search. I think he's a Canadian priest, Ronald Rolheiser, who wrote this book called The Holy Longing. And if you want a modern version of Augustine's wrestling with little less modern, probably ones are still alive in several books, but the same vein of thought as Thomas Merton's seven-story house. So he was a kind of a wild period. He was he discovered God, and the seven-story house is a personal story of discovering God. So because we have all this desire for goodness and beauty and truth and love, but everything in this world is always touched by finitude, limitation, and the ultimate end, death. It does raise these great questions. So number one, where do we come from? What's our origin? Second great question, where are we going? What's our end, our purpose? Third, what's wrong with us? I'll circle back to all these questions. Fourth, what's the solution? Fifth, why are we here? What's the meaning and purpose of human life? Those are the great questions that every single human person that's ever lived a brief, got old enough to think and be conscious, has had to answer. And everyone who follows us is going to answer these fundamental questions. And as I said, we answer them frequently more by the way we live, not always necessarily have we yet come to a clarity of thought about it, but we live an answer to all these great questions based on how we live life day in, day out. So I want to start with that first question. Where do we come from? Well, I want to, in our reflections tonight, connect our questions and answers with the world outside of us. So in the 21st century, we're living in a world with, is it 6 billion human beings on the planet now? More than that now. And there are great ancient religious traditions on planet Earth. Hinduism is probably the oldest great world religion. You've got Buddhism, which is still alive and well throughout the globe. You've got Chinese philosophy, Taoism. And then in the West, you've got the great monotheistic religions, Judaism, the most ancient, Christianity, and Islam. But in addition to that, in the last 500 years since the so-called Enlightenment and Western civilization, we also have a whole worldview that is independent of these ancient traditions or unaware of its roots in the Christian tradition. And so it's also reflecting on all these great questions. And so when you ask the question, where do we come from? The scientific world today tries to answer that question. And so they'll say, well, you know, if you look at the unfolding of what's happened on planet Earth, it's probably 4 to 6 billion years old. We look back over this 4 to 6 billion years that planet Earth has been here, and even go back further, how old is the cosmos, the whole universe that we can see? They think it's somewhere these days between 12 and 15 billion years old. So life on this planet Earth has only been around for a tiny fraction of that window of time. And if you've ever watched any of the great programs on astronomy these days, you may know that we're on a little planet, third planet from a star, the sun, which is a lot like innumerable stars in a galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. Our galaxy is part of a local group of galaxies, and the number of galaxies that we can now see because of these advanced telescopes. I mean, we are if you compare a fragment of a grain of sand to the size of planet Earth, the Earth is even smaller compared to the whole universe. So we are this, if you look at it from this huge perspective, we are like, we're just a dot. And someone said, if you take the history of the universe, that 12 to 15 billion years down to a 24-hour time period, human beings show up about 2 seconds before midnight. So, so much time has gone by before we even get to this point. So part of the question is, where do we come from? Well, scientists who are trying to figure out the origins of the universe look back through things like the Hubble telescope, and we've got a better one that can look back further in time. And they say, well, 12 to 15 billion years ago, of course, they got real aware of something that is often commonly called the Big Bang. So at some particular point, everything that we know today in the universe, the visible universe, began. Time, energy, space, matter, So, scientists will carry you back to that moment. And on this planet, you can also look at I was a biology undergraduate before I switched to history. So I did a lot of studies of biology, including evolutionary biology. And you can trace the development of human life on this planet from simple microorganisms all the way up to human beings. Now, we can't explain how it all happened exactly, but there's certainly a connection between all the things on this planet. So we're composed of the same fundamental DNA structure, almost all plants and animals and humans. We share a lot of DNA actually in common. You're only to go to a zoo, look at the monkeys and great apes. The way they look back at you, sometimes feel like, wow, this is very odd. They look a lot more like me. What they would, back at from the zoo. So, evolutionary biologists will say, well, yeah, so we started as a simple form of life on this planet, and it's evolved through these hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years into the human person. So now, of course, this is the best that modern science can do to answer these questions about where we come from. And when they propel us to the opposite end, where we go and what's the end going to look like? How many of you watch those TV programs that show you all the things that can happen on planet Earth? And there's a lot of them. So some's going to get big, some might swallow up the Earth, some explode out and collapse in, or an asteroid can come along and hit us again, like they happen with the dinosaurs. So all these potential disasters can happen on planet Earth. And at some point, the sun will burn out, like stars have a history of their lifespan. But what about the universe or the cosmos as a whole? And the two great theories are that it's expanding right now. So the universe is expanding outward in all directions. Will this continue forever? Or will at some point will it turn around and collapse back in on itself? So those are two could be 20th century theories about where the universe is going. And the question also is raised, what happens when human beings die? What happens to us? And modern thinkers try to answer that question in a variety of ways. What are some of the answers they give us today outside of what Christian world? What happens to the human person in death? We're gone. It's the end. So for some, particularly if you're an atheist, for example, they think that when you die, that's the end of your life. So death is the end. Besides the atheists, there's a group of folks out there called agnostics who are not sure if there is a God or isn't. So their answer might be what? What will happen when we die? Okay, now that is another competitive theory, reincarnation.
I want to be my mother-in-law's son.
It's interesting. Reincarnation is actually an ancient tradition in Hindu thought. So it goes back to Hinduism originally. And in the ancient understanding, you can go through an endless cycle of lives. And if you fulfill your duty, so if you're a ladybug, and you live a perfect ladybugness sort of life, and you might come back as a worker in the fields, And if you fulfill that vocation, your dharma very well, then indeed you might come back as the highest branch in Hinduism is the priestly class, the Brahmins. So you might come back as a Brahmin, or if you did a bad job, you didn't fulfill your duty, you might come back as a caterpillar or something. So cycle of life, you can cycle around either to better or worse based on how you live this current life you're given. So that sense of that life can go on and be reincarnated over and over again endless times is an ancient Hebrew understanding. There's also kind of a Hollywood version of that, but people say, you guys better all the time I can remember all my lives when I was a soldier and an actor and a politician and so there is a modern version. Usually those don't get into the lower than human life forms, so they don't go backwards, they go forward all the time. But there are indeed different people who believe in some form of the cycle of rebirths. But I will say this, even in Hinduism and Buddhism, that doesn't happen forever. So at some moment in Hinduism, there is a liberation from that cycle of rebirths, a moksha. And Buddhism, eventually there's nirvana, which is the absence of, as it were, drop returns to the ocean from which it came. So the end of that cycle of rebirths. The other answer that we sometimes get today is, we don't know what happens, right? It's a question mark. That's sort of an agnostic answer. We don't know what's going to happen. You ask the question, what's wrong with us? So first of all, I'll just say, are there any people alive who still believe there's something wrong with us? And we're perfectly fine with who we are. I always say in the newspapers every morning, the local news, find adequate evidence. Something is not quite right with us human beings, right? We're not quite, things are not quite good with us all the time. But I also add to that, I don't have to look at the news to discover that. If I'm really honest with myself and I look at myself, I can recognize there's some things about me that are not good, that are not right. There's something wrong with me at times. Why is it, that I want to be kind of loving and suddenly become extremely impatient and irritable for no seeming reason? This poor passerby cut me off in traffic or something. Why is it that one day I'm perfectly thoughtful and patient waiting in line at the grocery store, and another day every person in the line irritates me? Why are they taking so long picking up their money, and why can the cashier not figure out how to make a change? Why is it that at times I'm not become the person that I want to be? So if you're a modern secular thinker, there have been a variety of answers that have been forth on this. The most ancient one, by the way, goes back to the Greeks, Socrates and the philosophers. When you ask the ancient Greek philosophers who thought a lot about these big questions, you ask the question, what's wrong with us with the human being? You know what Socrates' answer was? We didn't know better. If we knew the right good thing, we would do it. So it's a lack of knowledge or ignorance. Now, modern thinkers throw in some other things, don't they? You ask Sigmund Freud, one of the psychologists in that line of thought, why do human beings act in weird ways sometimes? What would their answer be? Take psychology classes. There's two big schools of thought in the 20th century psychology. They say these two things shape human behavior. What those two big things are. All right, so Freud is getting into yes. So we are all have these structures of our personality. The id is kind of our conscience, or the id is the self-centered part, the desiring part. Superego is the conscience part. Ego is the aware conscious self. But what's the source of our behaviors and motivations? The great schools of thought center either around it's our genetics, it's the way we're made and our genes, or we're shaped by behavior, or like situations. All right, let's propose that these three things might adequately answer what's wrong with us. If that's really the case, you can already see some solutions, can't you? So what's the solution of the problem of ignorance? We just don't know the right thing. What's the solution? Education, right? So this whole Western school of thought that is considered education very important in helping to advance human persons to become better So the importance of education is part of that answer. With genetics, what would be the answer? Or students of psychology, how do they attempt to address it? All right, so we've gotten into the era of genetic editing, that is true, they're attempting to do some gene manipulation, but they also, the whole school of thought that uses medicines attempts to medicate some of the predispositions as a result of genetic issues. There's a whole school of thought about humanity, as I mentioned, is a famous psychological theory of that in the 20th century. There was a woman in a psychological institution who was walking around like this, and they asked the two different big schools of psychologists, why is she doing that? And the Freudian said she obviously had some early life experience where she lost a child. And so that movement is a symbol of, that loss. And they did a search for a chart, and she had lost a child. But then the behavioralists who said, well, it's based on rewards or punishments for behavior, said, well, actually, we promised to give her cigarettes and she would do that function. So we've been giving her cigarettes to do that. So that's kind of those two schools of thought. That's the where their mental framework operate. So looking at human behavior, is it based on behaviors that are rewarded or punished, or is it something more profoundly deeply rooted? So if you believe that it's the environment that shapes us, what's the solution? Better environments, right? So psychological counseling, intervention to take people out of abusive home environments, safer places to live. So we're going to try to change the environment that is shaping the person to make it more positive. Why are we here? Let's take a moment to ask. We're looking at the world out there and outside the Christian vista, and you ask people, why are we here? And you look at their lived experiences, how they're living their life. What would be the biggest answers? Why are we here? What are we here for?
A really good friend said we're here because God needs a good laugh.
God needs a good laugh. Right?
Yeah.
That doesn't involve
We're here for his opinion.
right. That doesn't involve at least a view of something supernatural. But it's not the Christian view of God, of course. So
I think it was.
So we'll circle back to that. But if you don't have a vantage point of anything supernatural, what are you here for? What did Ecclesiastes say? Eat, drink, and be merry, or tomorrow you're going to die. So a lot of people live life as if I may as well just enjoy what I've got here right now. Yeah. So there's an ancient Greek philosophy that focused on that. It's called Epicureanism. So Epicurus said, enjoy everything you can in this life. Art, friendship, music, the good things of life, they're all limited. So appreciate them well. The Stoics were the other Greek philosophers that they said, no, don't overdo, have a certain detachment and freedom from all the pleasures of life, because you're going to be disappointed if you get too hooked in the pleasures of life. So keep that mental reserve without having too much enjoyment or too much suffering. So you kind of hold yourself a bit at a distance. So, but the modern existentialist would say, well, there's not any given purpose to the human being here. We each have to discover that for ourselves or create it for ourselves. So, maybe I think my purpose in life is to make as much money as I can. Maybe I think my purpose in life is to get as much power as I can. Or my purpose in life is to build big buildings or whatever. So for an existentialist, we create our own purpose. Now, I want to look then at these big questions that we all ask and we're answering them by the way we live. So even somebody that says they're a Christian, for example, goes to church every Sunday and claims to be a follower of Jesus, if you actually look at the motivations of their heart and ask them, why are we here? The lived answer might be, I'm enjoying life as well as I can. I might actually be living a fulfilling lifestyle. You know, so our professed beliefs don't always connect with how we actually live our life. There's a disconnection sometimes between those two things. We think we believe one way, but our lived reality is giving a different answer. So, and the real answer is, of course, the way we really live. So that's what really determines the truth about it. So, from a Christian answer, so we focus now on what we as Catholic Christians believe. I want to remind you that the first time we talked about being Catholic, the second time, what it means to be Catholic. I said Protestants are either or in their approach. Either it's A or it's B. As Catholics have this both and approach. So when we think about it from that perspective as Catholics, and we ask where do we come from, what's our origin? The Catholic Church would have no beat with scientific answers. You know, we can fully believe the universe has been around 12 to 15 billion years. We can believe that it originated 12 billion years ago in a Big Bang. We have no trouble with any of the evidence that modern scientists discover. And the same is true, by the way, of evolution. As we evolve from lower forms of life, from that perspective alone, we would not quibble with anything that scientists discover in terms of how long people are on the planet. But we would add something further. And that something further would be the deeper question. Why is there anything here to begin with rather than that? How did that Big Bang begin? What started it all? And no scientist has an answer for that question. They can look back at these telescopes as early as they can, but they still don't know why there was a universe to begin with, how it all started. So it takes an answer beyond science to go beyond those boundaries. And our understanding is that everything in creation, the whole cosmos, is created by God with a loving intent. So we believe in creation by God with a loving intent. It will beg the question, which we're going to look at the next time we gather. Well, next time y'all will be looking at Old Testament. Scripture. But when I meet with you all again, we're going to be looking a bit at what kind of a God we're talking about when we create this universe. It's not, there's many beliefs about God. But let me add, when I frame it this way with a loving intent, I'm already specifying the nature of God as we Catholic Christians understand God. So everything in the whole universe, including you and me, we believe are sustained at every moment by God. The creative power and love of God cease to be. So God holds all creation in being. And one author said, why does God create? Not to laugh at human beings, but God creates the universe and all creatures out of pure self, out of pure love. So God creates a universe in order for God to love the universe, all the creatures that are there. So God is pure love. And the only desire of God is that those who have the capacity love God in return. So it's all about creation by a loving God. Could God have done that through a Big Bang? Absolutely. I think it's very interesting that light, time, energy, all of that begins at this moment that scientists call Big Bang, modern colloquial terms. And it's interesting in the poetry of Genesis, what's the first thing that was created? God says, let there be light. And there was light. That's before the sun and the stars were created by God. It's like this moment of is very consonant with this beginning. And God can create human beings through evolution. So the two are not mutually exclusive. So God chose to create us that way. The only thing we would add is that God creates each and every human being with a particular intentionality. We are endowed with what we call the soul, which is the spiritual part of who we are. So when you ask what a soul does or can do, the soul has the capacity to know. The rock simply exists, but human beings have capacities to know and love that rocks don't have. Or even I hate to tell you this, even your dogs don't have, right? They have an affection for you, and they can love you, and they can do certain things, and have a certain love, but they don't have the same capacity to know and love that a person has. So don't throw rocks at me or argue with me. All right, so now where are we going? So we as Catholic Christians believe that at the end of our life on earth, that this is not the end, nor do we believe that we're going to go through endless cycles of rebirth. We only get one shot at life. I was talking to Father Joe McMahon about reincarnation. He said, don't you think once is enough during this life? So, and you live life differently. I think all of God, there's a number of lives that I can live, versus thinking this is the only life I'm given. I'm born, I'm going to die, and every day is precious. I've only got a limited amount of time to live this life, and I don't know how many days or years that's going to be, but this is the life I'm called to live. And we believe that beyond the boundary of death, that we will indeed personally survive. So the Buddhists believe we can return to the oneness with all it is. We believe that there will be a personal awareness and consciousness. So we call it resurrection from the dead. I'll say a lot more about what happens at the end later in this series of classes, because there's more than just our own personal survival. God intends something for all creation. What the book of Revelation speaks about is the new heavens and the new earth. So Paul talks about all creation is growing, is waiting for the revelation of the children of God. So God has an intentionality for all creation that is good. So at the end of this mortal existence of this universe, we believe that there will be eternity, the eternal life that is God that already sustains and holds all things and all of us in being. So what's wrong with us? Well, again, we're using a bow-back approach. We will not argue with any of the other answers. It is true that sometimes people are ignorant, they don't know the right thing to do, therefore they do the wrong thing. So education as a solution, in that case, very important. That's why we believe in education. Early life environments do indeed dramatically shape the human person. That's why it's very important that we create loving homes, neighborhoods, and a world and cities for people to live in, so that people grow up in atmospheres of love matters for us. It is part of the solution. And yes, we are affected by our genetic makeup. We cannot deny that. But we also believe that within the human person, even though we are predisposed a certain way genetically, that God has given each of us what we call the gift of freedom. And so at the deepest level, what's wrong with us beyond the ignorance and the shaping of the world around us and our genes, we would say the deepest wound of the human person is sin itself. God created me to live a certain way, and I live in opposition to that. I create suffering for myself and others. So if God created me to be honest, to have integrity, and I'm dishonest and I lie, then I build destruction around me. People don't trust me. I can't live in a friendship with people that are dishonest. So So the ultimate deepest problem of the human person is what we call sin, both personal and also original. So all of us are affected by that original turning of humanity away from God. It's rippled out to touch every human person. You can look at it in a tiny microcosm. You've seen it in the cartoons, right? Boss gets mad at the worker, he yells at him, he goes home and yells at his wife, and wife yells at the kid, and kicks the dog, right? So that's an example of that ripple effect, you know. When bad things are happening, that original sin affects in a negative way the world. So let's just take a quick sidebar. For example, when President Putin decided to invade the country, terrible harm and suffering happened to the people of Ukraine. They're suffering a great deal as a result of what's happening. And also now people in Russia are suffering. Right? So one person's freedom and the way that freedom is used or misused can ripple out to affect everyone else. So the misuse of that freedom that God gave us is the ultimate problem of the human person. And the ultimate solution, beyond the things that others have discovered, is we need a healing that is greater than we are. We can't fix ourselves. To put it simply, we need a savior or a redeemer. So that turning from God is so deep and profound, it's so important to the human person that it required God's salvific intervention to heal the human person. And that's precisely what we believe happens in the incarnation, death, and resurrection of Jesus, the Spirit. But the deepest healing of the human person happens. So a moment ago, I talked about when the human being misuses our freedom, opens up to touch everybody. You know, the opposite is also the case, isn't it? So Paul puts it this way: if one act condemned all of humanity in Adam, then one human being, Christ, has redeemed all of humanity. So you see the opposite ripple effect of goodness. So when I choose to love another human being selflessly, just for the sake of the other human being, genuine, authentic love, that loving of the other ripples out to touch other human beings. When I love another just for who they are, just for the fact that they're a nature of God, and I simply love them if they're good or not, then that act of love toward that person ripples out to touch all human beings everywhere. So for human beings, we have this social dimension, and that's why someone like Mother Teresa of Calcutta, simply loving the dying on the streets of Calcutta, begins to draw other women from all over the planet to join that ministry. That's why people begin to say, wow. And the key there is remaining humble. You know, it's not about me. I'm getting accolades for helping poor people. It's simply doing it because I love the person God has placed in front of me. And that's my motivation. What we call selfless love, or in the Greek language, the word is agape. Selfless love is God's love, or in Latin, caritas, sometimes translated charity. So we go to the bottom line. Why are we here? That really is the purpose for which God created us. Ultimately, is love. And how do we know that? Because when we ask Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And there's no greater commandment than these two. They sum up everything. And then he says in the Gospel of John, as the Father loves me, so also I love you. Live in my love, and you will live in my love and keep my commandments. And how do you do that? By loving them as I love you. So that's the ultimate purpose of human life. We say in some of our highlights, our prayers at Mass, that we ask God to help us to love our Creator above all things and in all things. And there's a beautiful author I just discovered, Paula Darcy. What is the book about the bird?
Yeah, I've read that. It's the Red Bird.
Yeah, the red bird. This Paula, you know, she grew up in a strict Catholic home, and she thought that God was a mean judge and masculine and all that. she was a young adult, she decided she's gonna leave all that and pursue happiness and freedom. She got married to a young man and had a child, and, and in the beginning, what she says is she thought she was leaving God, she was leaving a caricature of God. And God was already drawing himself in a way she never imagined. And a horrible thing happened. So they were only married a short window of time. A drunk driver crossed the interstate and hit her car head on. And her husband and the child died. And she was left, she was pregnant with a second child. And she said, I went into a pit of darkness and despair that was deeper than any darkness or despair I had ever been. And she lived that way for a long time, carrying this child. And her only prayer was to just want to help me for this child. And she said she began to discover that what she thought the deepest darkness and despair that people experienced, there was something deeper than that. And she began to discover God was with her in that darkness. At first very dimly. And she began to see him in the eyes of people around her, the light in their eyes. She said some people wouldn't look at her. Some people wouldn't allow her to suffer. But there were other people, they looked in her eyes. They listened to her. They were with her in this moments of suffering. And she began to see the light of God in that. When it came up with that birth of that baby, she was praying, I just want to help me birth. And the doctor said, I'm going into labor, we're going to have to do a C-section. And she was just angry with God. This is the only thing I asked for. And as she's going through this experience, she had this moment of revelation. And God said, she goes, what do you want from me? When we take a husband and a child, what do you want from me? And what she heard God say to her was, I want you to want me. And once she realized that, she realized she did want God. And she was free. She could receive, she opened up, that baby. Surprised the whole verses and doctors stuff like that. She said, then I could receive my baby as a gift from God, not my possession. I made my new baby into God. So I'm God of anything else. So I could receive this gift from God. It's beautiful, precious. So I want to share with you, I started with St. Augustine. Talking about how we all have these desires in us, being, and nothing in this world ever fulfills them. This is what Augustine said. He said, and he's writing on his own reflection, he says, oh, eternal truth, true love and beloved eternity. You are my God. To you I sigh day and night. When I first came to know you, you drew me to yourself. So God was already working on Augustine while he was out there searching all of these pagan philosophies and living life as he was living it. And he says, I wasn't ready to see you yet. He says, but meanwhile, you overcame the weakness of my vision, sending forth most strongly the beams of your light. I trembled at once with love and dread. I learned that I was in a region unlike yours and far distant. Augustine would say later on, God, you were closer to me than I was to myself. And this is the most famous section of it. Hear this. Late have I loved you, O beauty, ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside. It was there that I searched for you. In my unloveliness, I plunged into the lovely things which you created. You were with me, but I was not with you. Created things kept me with you. Yet if they had not been in you, they would not have been at all. Now listen to how Augustine uses every sense of the body. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, you dispelled my blindness. You breathed your fragrance on me. I drew in breath, and now I am before. I have tasted you. Now I hunger and thirst for more. You touched me, and I broke. hearts are restless till they rest in God. And once we discover that God is the ultimate purpose for which we're created, everything else in life makes sense. So where we come from, where we're going, what's wrong with us, how we find a solution, our purpose, our meaning in life, those are all connected mysteries, those great questions. So the only real question I have is what am I really thankful for? What are my lived answers to those great questions? Have I discovered yet this creator who is closer to me than I am to myself? Now, what's the general answer to that question, by the way? Sometimes, yeah, sometimes not. Right? I go back and forth. Right? So, when God is infinitely faithful and loving, when things go back and forth, we struggle to remain connected spiritually. But God never changes. The love of God, which is this of love, is an ocean of light, is always in us and through us and around us, whether we're aware of it. So, God, the very nature of God is love. God is always self-gift, the creation. And the desire of God is always that we return self-gift. And once we do that, we can love each other more well, actually. If I really do love God with all my heart, my soul, and strength, I am going to love you. And I'm going to learn to love myself. If I don't love myself well, so that's like a commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. Brother Joseph, that's the problem. That is the way we love our neighbor, which is not very well. Right? So because we're not loving ourselves very well either. So it's connected. Right? God loves us with an infinite love. And when I become aware of that infinity, accept it, then I know that I'm beloved of God, the son or daughter of God Most High, beloved by God. And that teaches me to learn to treasure myself as a child of God. And when I discover that, I'll begin to see everybody around me as a treasure. We're all gifts from God to me. There's nobody else worthy. Even the person that gets under my skin the most is a gift from God to me. I used to, I heard this phrase somewhere, someone said, oh, certain people like sandpaper. They kind of rub you the wrong way. You sit there, oh, this again, you know. But, you know, what does sandpaper do? It smooths off my roughness. So God sends them to me to smooth my roughness off. So when I become more spiritually mature, I say, thank you, God, for sending me this situation. So, all right, questions, observations. It's being human. It's very wonderful, very difficult, very painful, tremendously joyful, right? We have this whole wide range of experience. So. All right, so we're going to go to our tables. There are questions there to reflect on, and so enjoy your discussions. And those of you at home, we discuss your, we enjoy your discussion on that. So,
Okay.